Okay. Shows that we're up.
Okay, we are live again. Had some technical difficulties there. We got dropped. I think we're back. Okay, let's see. Where in the hell were we? In the middle of talking about Askarov versus Kaikar France. Uh, yeah, do you want to pick up or do you
Yeah, Askarov's last fight was against Joe Benavidez. Had great front kicks, great right hand counter. Again, he's doing that. Keep your left hand out, right hand over, jab, and took his back right away. And he controlled Joe Benavidez for all of round two, which was amazing. Cara France, I could watch all his fights over and over and over. Like, he's a city kickboxing guy. His last fight against Cody Garbrandt was amazing. Cody Garbrandt was coming down from another weight class. It did 7 months to do the weight cut. He looked significantly smaller. Cody Garbrandt is around my height, 5'8", yet cut down to 125. I'm like 195, like almost 200, and I'm like, no way, like how? And so you see Carl France, he looks like a little boy. He looks like my son's 11 years old, and he looks like my son. I was like, oh my goodness, like what did he get himself into? But his confidence, he did not let the size, the experience, all that. Cody Garbrandt being a former UFC champion. Didn't affect him at all. He took control right away, lunging punches, kicks, left hand guiding his overhands. He ends up finishing the fight with like a 6 or 7 punch combo, which was beautiful to watch. Just at the end of it, just essentially like grabbing him by the throat and then just forcing him into the punches. Another fight that he did was against Bontarin, where the previous fight where he was like controlled for most of the fight grappling wise. Rogelio Bontarin, great grappling pedigree, Muay Thai, amateur kickboxing. Made him have to circle, have to avoid. He was essentially in a rear naked choke defense for like the majority of the round and majority of the fight. Um, uh, Ended up standing up and turning, able to shake him off, getting him to turn, pawing jabs. Like he had like 20 seconds left in the round and was able to put his work together beautifully and stop him. It was a crazy stoppage. Do you remember watching it where like Bontarin slumps and falls on his head? Cara France runs off. Herb Dean never waved it off, so Cara France comes back to hit him.
yeah.
Herb Dean then stops it. Bontarin gets his mouth guard, throws it at him, and just like it was funny to watch. This is a fight I'm excited to see. I don't know if I agree with the odds. Like I think it's a lot closer for sure. I'd love for Cara France to win because I think with a win like here, he sets himself up for title contention.
Yeah, and this is definitely an underdog pick for me at plus 280. When you look at Kaikar France, his last two fights, first round knockouts, I feel like there was a change in him after his loss against Royval. Uh, Car France has always been a great fighter and is always looking for that knockout. But if you look at since he started in the UFC, it was nothing but decision wins, which is similar to Askarov. Askarov has 3 decision wins and a draw in the UFC, which is just how Car France started off his career. But it seems like there was a change, and I believe he did. I trying to recall, did Car France change gyms or striking coaches? I remember him talking about something changed in either in the Cody Garbrandt fight or the fight before that. And anyway, if he didn't change anything, it looks like a different guy to me in terms of how hungry he is and the way in which he won his last 2 fights. So to have 2 first round knockouts like that for a guy who has experience in the UFC and then to give him a plus 280 against a guy who has a draw and 3 wins in the UFC, I don't really understand. I guess where that's coming from. I don't know if it's the reach advantage, the height, or what. But Car France is a striker, and Askarov, he's also a striker. He doesn't have any submission wins. Oh yeah, he does have submission wins. So, but yeah, I don't know how they get to that. I guess it's because it's the wrestler versus striker mentality, where the wrestler is going to have the advantage because if you can get on top, you're essentially winning the fight. So maybe the odds makers are predicting a boring fight that Askarov is going to be able to take down Car France and just hold top position. But I don't really see that happening. Car France has gone against some really good wrestlers, and that's not how those other fights have gone down, from what I recall.
No, for sure. I don't agree with the discrepancy in the odds. Just his training camp alone, he's training against, with Israel Adesanya, Dan Hooker, who just fought last weekend. He's around guys who are staying active, busy, and I expect to see some of that with his, activity level this fight.
All right. And next up, we have Matt Brown versus Brian Barbarina. And talk about close fights. The odds makers say this one is dead even at negative 110 on each side. Uh, Matt Brown, um, let's see here, is coming off of a KO win against Lima in his last fight. Brown is an absolute veteran. Uh, he's a guy who's a very well rounded MMA guy. Uh, I great striking, great on the ground. He can get up and not be held down and controlled. And I feel like it's the same thing with Barbarina. Barbarina's last fight was a decision win over Darian Weeks. It was a really close fight. Barbarina is also a veteran, although between the two, the biggest difference I see, I feel like Barbarina favors striking a bit more than Brown does, even though they're both considered strikers. If you look at their fighting styles on the ESPN. But I feel like this is another mirror match where the UFC just found like two guys who have like the same record, same style, and they're just like put them together and see what happens. Um, they both have a similar reach, 2.5 reach advantage for Brown. They both have similar records. Brown's got 25-18. Barbarina's 16-8. They're both coming off of wins. They both have similar KO finishes. Brown has maybe a few more subs. Barbarina has a few more decision wins. Similar fight times. Like this is another mirror match. I feel like, and yeah, kind of as the odds makers are indicating here, this is a 50-50. I wouldn't put money on either guy because I don't know who would you really favor in this one.
I'm always gonna root for the old guy because Matt Brown has been fighting on UFC since 2008. Undercards for people like Couture versus Lesnar, like Jackson versus Jardine, Couture versus Vera, Saint Pierre. Like he's just been around so long, and it was great to see his last fight where he knocked out Diego Lima, and he was like, "How's that for 41 or whatever his birthday was? You b words." And I was like, "Yeah." That was like the first thing he said to the camera, and I'm like, "Yeah, I want to have that attitude because he's getting up there in age. You could see he's almost all gray hair, still fighting, still putting on shows for everyone." He is what I would think like, he's to me a version of like a Cowboy Cerrone. He's just a guy that you want to see fight who is, can hang with the top guys, um, and you want to see them keep winning and keep showing that they can do this. I would say for me, just Matt Brown. Barbarina, I haven't watched too much of him. Brown, I've always been a fan of his just because his attitude and he just goes for it. I gotta love that. And then just that attitude of just be like, how's that for 40? Like I'm like, oh, I'll have my moment one day.
Yeah. All right, and yeah, that should be a fun one. These are guys who are both willing to just stand and throw and go to war. So should be an exciting fight. Next up, we got Joanne Wood versus Alexa Grasso. So I think this was a few days ago the headliner, and then Curtis Blaydes and Daukaus. I feel like just in the past day or so, just slid their way into mainlining this one. So I'm not sure what was going on there, but I love watching Joanne Wood, who formerly was Joanne Calderwood, I believe, was her maiden name, and it's funny that it's now just
Similar.
shortened. It seems like, yeah, it's just easier to say. Um, it's interesting with this one because Joanne's coming off of a 2-fight losing streak, whereas Grasso's coming off of a 2-fight winning streak. And you know, when it comes to MMA, the mental game, the confidence plays such a big factor. I'm always going to give it to the person who has momentum in terms of an edge. Although in this one, I want to see Wood win because I love watching her fight. She's one of the few fighters from Scotland that's in the top ranks of the UFC. Actually, I'm not sure if she's where she's ranked right now, Joanne Wood, but has been ranked, fought some of the best people, has wins over Jessica I, Andrea Lee, Ariana Lipsky. Has racked up some really good wins. She's a veteran. She's been in the UFC since 2014 when she was in the Ultimate Fighter 20. And Grasso, not quite as much experience, but still a great fighter. She's from Mexico. Like I said, coming off of 2 wins with her last win against Macy Barber. So it's not, definitely not a pushover. To get a win over Macy Barber, I feel like is a big feather in her cap and has got to really boost that confidence. What are your thoughts on this matchup here?
I would like to see Wood keep keep up a record, try to keep going up and keep ascending the ranks. Grasso, interestingly enough, has some good wins in her. Uh, she beat Macy Barber, who I think a lot of people, even Macy Barber, were expecting to be a champ at like an early age. So I will root for her on that one alone. Wins over Ji Young Kim, who just fought a couple weeks ago and had that great battle with Molly McCann, that I still feel she won. I'll never. But McCann, great win last
You're not
weekend.
going to get over it.
I'm never gonna get over it. But McCann, she tore her up. Tore her opponent up this past weekend. So hey, man, way to prove it. But in doing the MMA math, Grasso does have a good chance at kind of playing spoiler. She is a newer fighter. Um, is significantly younger. It's 35 versus a 28-year-old, and can learn a lot from this experience. Grasso is also from Mexico, which is again, hoping to see these fighters who come from other countries, keep influencing the UFC with their culture. We mentioned Jakisi and that other fighter. I can't we can't even say his last name. Um, Vyashliv Borshev, bringing in that culture identity into the ring and into the cage. And, I want to keep seeing that because, I want all these fighters are from different parts of the world, and I want to see more fights in different parts of the world and, just keep growing the sport. And that way keeps growing our fan base too. Uh, Northern
Absolutely.
Ireland is always trending with us, so shout out. Maybe one day we'll go out there and see Joanne Wood fight in front of her, uh, heritage or people. Uh, this is a fight where
I'm pretty sure. I don't know. I
you
don't
just
know
made
what
that
people
up.
from Scotland would think about. You could saying that Northern Ireland
Northern
and
Ireland,
Scotland are
no,
the
whatever. It's like Hispanics and Latinos. We're all the same. It's okay. We're cousins. Distinct separation. I'm gonna get beat up for that. But for many things at this point, I'm sure. Girl fights, I like having it be a co-main event, keep attracting eyes to the sport. One thing I've gotten myself out of is also like with these fights that go to decisions, like I'm just old school. Like I want a definitive outcome. And watching a lot of these fights lately and seeing the ones that went to decision and seeing that they were battles and just who came out on better, who was better prepared, that to me is starting to intrigue me more and more to see, the cardio, the strategy, do they have the ability to be a complete mixed martial artist? And I think it'll show, with a lot of the girl fights, you don't tend to see finishes, except for McCann last weekend. A lot of them go to decision, and they're still great fights. So I want to see this. I want to see another great girl fight. Can it live up to the hype of the one last weekend, which I think we'll see forever? That's going to be like in the top UFC 100 knockouts of all time. Uh,
Yeah,
so, I want to see that energy and momentum keep going for the girls. Like all eyes are going to be on these girls. Like they're the only girls on, well, they're on the main card. So,
yeah. Before last week, when I think of like the greatest women's fights ever, I'd probably go back to Wei Lee and Joanna.
hmm
That fight last week. I can't say it was it was not as competitive, but it was definitely up there in the top women's fights ever, just because of the energy that McCann brought into the fight
Hmm.
and how close she was to finishing her for so long, and she could not finish her off. And then her opponent actually coming back, throwing strikes back. That's always the best. Makes it more exciting. But it's not just one sided. And then it was the finish. You're, that is going to be a highlight finish that's going to be shown on so many UFC promos. I'm sure for so long, that spinning elbow finish from McCann.
Mm.
Well, back to Joanne Wood and Alexa Grasso. Uh, to have to follow up that fight from last week has got to suck for them. But I still am looking forward to seeing the fight, although I'm not expecting to see that kind of a finish. Both of these fighters, when they do get the finish, it tends to be from submission, not from TKO or from KO. Um, I'm rooting for Joanne. I think if you look at her stats, even though these are kind of another mirror match, I do feel like they favor Joanne a little bit more, even though she doesn't have the momentum. If you look at her output, she does more up on the when they're up on the feet, and she also does more in terms of the grappling. If you look at her takedown average, her takedown accuracy, her takedown defense is all. She's just got a little bit of edge on all of those stats. For that reason, I'm going to be picking, and I'm just picking every underdog apparently on this fight card. I like all the underdogs on this fight card. Um, yeah, that's what I'm going with. Any other thoughts on that one?
No, I just,
Okay.
like I said, all eyes are going to be on them because there's. I hope they can live up to the hype of the and the result of last weekend, and it'd be great. If not, I still expect them to put on a show.
All right, and for the main event, Curtis Blaydes versus Chris Daukaus. Blaydes coming in as a negative 400 favorite, which last week we saw like 3 fights on the main card were negative 400 favorite. So odds makers are predicting this is going to be very lopsided. Uh, Blaydes known for his superior wrestling, probably the best wrestling in the heavyweight division. Probably the best wrestler we've seen, maybe since DC.
Cormier, yeah.
And yeah, I don't know who would be on Curtis's level in terms of the takedown. Just getting the takedown and getting into top position. I think Blaydes might have the record for most takedowns in a heavyweight fight. I remember like a few fights or a few years ago, he ended up getting like 14 takedowns or something crazy in a single fight. I can't remember if it was against Derek Lewis or Nagano, but this guy is just a takedown monster. So yeah, that's going to be a tough night for Daukaus for sure when it comes to taking on that caliber of a wrestler in Curtis Blaydes. What are your thoughts on it?
Dawkins, I think the odds makers are very accurate on this one. Blades, I was very like I love Derek Lewis, but going into that fight, I was like, and he showed it early on. You're like Derek Lewis is in for a long night until he caught him with that uppercut that was very intentional, very well placed, very everything. Even Daniel Cormier is commenting on Blade's wrestling abilities, he is something that is above average. He's gonna be the guy to beat, I think, going forward. With Dawkins, watching some of his fights, he's got an interesting style because I don't know if I'd call him anything like his one finish against Alexei Olenek. He was definitely winning the stand up, but there wasn't anything like defining about it. It wasn't like power, it wasn't quickness, it wasn't precision. Like he ends up like in when he finished Alexei, he's got him pinned against the cage, and they were like Alexei's clearly rocked, and Dawkins did like pitter patter punches, and I was like, I was almost, I'm not a pro fighter, but like just like, damn, dude, like sit on your punches, something, because he's like, just like, and it was like flailing. Anyone who watches fights, watch that fight, and it's just like he ends up landing one or two finally, and the ref stops it because Alexei was like still standing up because he's. You got to kill him to stop him. But I was just like, man, like that's not like if I saw that and I was Curtis Blaydes, I was like, I'm gonna run right through him. There's no way that he's as close to being as powerful, as accurate as Derek Lewis, who I thought Blaydes was beating up until that point in that fight. Um, yeah, Daukaus is a really big guy. What is he, like 6'5"? So I think he uses his size to his advantage, and I see Blaydes running through him, man. Like Dawkins has some wins, but I don't think he's got the opposition that Blaydes has had. Blaydes has finished some champions, and
Yeah, and Daukaus, the I guess an interesting stat, although I don't know how impressive this is because I don't know how many takedowns have actually been shot at this guy, but he does have a 100% takedown defense. So he's not been taken down yet in the UFC, and he's
mm,
going against the guy who may have the record for most takedowns in a
yeah,
heavyweight match against Curtis Blaydes. And the reason I say it may not be that impressive is because if you look at his fights in the UFC, Daukaus, he's got one, two, three wins by KO in the first round, a win by KO in the second round, and a loss by KO in the first round in his last fight against Derek Lewis. So he's not spent a lot of time in the ring to give
yeah.
guys, the opportunity to, shoot shots. But he has gone against some, grapplers like Alexei Olenek. So um, my thought is if Daukaus can't land the uppercut when Curtis Blaydes is coming in, like Derek Lewis did against Blaydes, I feel like that's Daukaus' only chance. And I feel like he's got to be looking for it because he knows what Blaydes' game plan is going into this. It's not going to be a surprise. It's like fighting Khabib. You know exactly what the guy's going to do, so he's going to be preparing for it. And the question is, in my mind, can Daukaus throw an uppercut when Curtis Blaydes is taking a shot on him? If the answer is yes, he'll win. If the answer is no, then he's going to lose. And you know, uh, yeah, that I feel like that's how it's going to play out. And my guess is, yeah, the Blaydes is going to win. The odds makers are right on this one. This is not one where I'll pick the under. I'll go with all the other underdogs on this card, but not this one. Not picking Daukaus. I'm picking Blaydes on this one. And if you're playing DraftKings, this Blaydes is such a great fighter to pick because you rack up all those points from takedowns, which I love to see. 14 takedowns, at 5 points apiece in a DraftKings lineup. It's a lot of points.
No, for sure, man.
All right, and I guess I didn't mention in the beginning, fight prelims are going to be starting at 1 p.m. Main card starting at 4 p.m. Pacific. This fight is going to be in Columbus, Ohio. You can expect that the crowd is going to be going absolutely nuts because they probably haven't seen any live fighting for years now. If it's going to be anything like UK, it's probably going to be off the hook. It's going to be crazy. It's probably going to be a fun fight night with energy from the crowd going on. Any last thoughts, Fern?
No, thanks for following. Thanks for, joining us on this ride. We look forward to breaking down more and more fights and doing more live streams because they're super easy for us to do unless we have connectivity issues. I'll shake my fist at my internet provider. But other than that, thanks for joining us. Bam Fight Club, add us on all social media. We're getting there. We're gonna reach 1 million people here shortly,
Hit
and
subscribe.
right,
Yeah,
we
we
got
got
to.
to get we got to get our YouTube up. Our other Instagram, Facebook are doing great. We got to get our YouTube subscribes and views and likes up. So smash that like button, smash the subscribe button,
Yeah, thanks
and
again for
and leave a
joining us.
comment. Yeah, leave a comment if you disagree. We want to hear what you have to say in the comment section. Let's hear it.
For sure.
All right, see ya.
See ya, everybody.